My name's John Drain, and along with Michael Lipgrave, the Bishop of Lichfield in the Church of England, I'm co-chair of the Mission Theology Advisory Group, which is a missional think tank sponsored by the Church of England on the one hand and churches together in Britain and Ireland as well. One of our projects has been to think about social liturgy, by which we mean the kinds of things that we now do in the face of great challenge, great tragedy, or in great enjoyment and fulfillment in the wider culture. On 22nd of May 2017, a suicide bomber blew himself up outside a concert in Manchester in England that had just finished. The star of the concert was a 23-year-old American singer, Ariana Grande, and within a matter of days, she had made plans to return to the city of Manchester to hold what became One Love Manchester concert as a kind of reflection and rehabilitation, as she saw it, for the population in the face of this great tragedy. In the meantime, before the concert happened, actually there had been another terrorist attack, this time in London. So by the time the concert happened in early June, this time the moment was fraught with fear and grief and no doubt many other emotions, and one that spread well beyond Manchester and indeed well beyond the UK, with a TV audience live that peaked at 14.5 million. I was one of them, for personal as well as professional reasons. Actually, I've been thinking about how we express ourselves at such moments of social grief and anger for something like the last 20 years. Ever since I was myself caught up in the pastoral care of people dealing with the murder of school children in Dunblane in Scotland back in 1996. And of course that was followed not long after by the death of Princess Diana and many lesser events since. And I've consistently been of the opinion that such public outpourings of pain in a deep way reflect the spiritual search of our culture. And from a Christian perspective, they highlight some key challenges and opportunities in relation to our understanding of what mission might be like in Western cultures in the 21st century. So what I want to do in this short video is to reflect on some aspects of the One Love Manchester concert that particularly struck me, and then to offer a few thoughts on how any of this might relate to our thinking on mission. Of course, not everyone sees it this way. Some Christians feel that all this is intentionally marginalizing the church, and reflect on the fact that 100 years ago, such national mourning would have taken place in one of our grand cathedrals, or even on the streets, but led by clergy people of the national churches. Others, of course, other Christians are just not interested and see it as a completely secular thing with nothing to do either with church or any sort of spiritual expression. There were good questions raised about the timing of this concert in Manchester, whether just over a week gave enough time for people to lament, to come to terms with their feelings and the seriousness of what had happened. And there was some cynicism about Ariana Grande. At 23 and a young woman, was she really mature enough to handle this? Were the kind of questions that were floating around. However, I want to bypass those kinds of questions, not by suggesting they're not important, though the one asking about the maturity of Ariana Grande, I think, was well addressed and answered in relation to the actual concert on the night. But where I want to start is thinking about liturgy, which might seem a very, very churchy kind of place to start reflections on such an ostensibly secular occasion. But the thing that struck me as I was watching this concert, and has been confirmed as I've looked at it again in greater detail, is what I can only call the liturgical shape of the event. I have no idea whether that was intentionally built into it, but whatever you call it, there was certainly a meaningful order of events. So, not surprisingly, it began with a welcome from Ariana Grande, And then Marcus Mumford was first on stage, with the song Timshel as a sort of call to worship, setting the scene for all that would follow. And at the end, with a final benediction, as it were, was given by Ariana herself, with the old song Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I want to say more about Timshel in particular in a moment, but let's continue thinking about the flow of the concert. Robbie Williams was up with the song Strong, that needs no special pleading from me or anyone else to be seen as confession, because that's what the lyrics are all about, with a repeated refrain telling us, my life's a mess and it's starting to show, so before I'm old I'll confess. You think that I'm strong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Followed by Angels. Judging by the audience response, this was one of the most popular songs of the night. A song that, as I'll suggest in a minute, gives us plenty to think about, but also offers a form of absolution and reassurance that things we don't need to be defeated by our own shame. Think of these lyrics. Does an angel contemplate my fate? 'Cause I've been told that salvation lets their wings unfold, and through it all she offers me protection, a lot of love and affection. Wherever it may take me, I know that life won't break me. When I come to call, she won't forsake me. That was a message subsequently reinforced by Pharrell Williams with the song Lucky and Get Happy, as a sort of thanksgiving, offering reassurance that we are indeed loved. And then, of course, Bono appeared through a video link, kind of present but not there, present as a sort of elder statesman sort of person, hovering above it all in a way that almost suggested this was a message originating in some other world, which in a way it did. He gave a single line of wisdom that, while not an actual scriptural quotation, owes a lot to writings in the Bible, such as the Psalms, the book of Job, and Ecclesiastes. His message was simple. There is no end to grief. That is how we know there is no end to love. And then a song that in this context could only function, I suggest, as intercession, as the Black Eyed Peas and will.i.am sang, Where is the Love? This was the first overt mention of terrorism, but there's an awful lot of it in this song. Here are some of the words. People killing, people dying, children hurt and you hear them crying. Can you practice what you preach, or would you turn the other cheek? And following up with the repeated refrain, Father, 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 help us, send some guidance from above, 'cause people got me questioning, where is the love? Now, if that isn't prayer, then what is it? So was there a sermon as well? I think there were several elements that can be mentioned here, but the central one was undoubtedly Justin Bieber's contribution. He began with an acoustic version of the song Cold Water, which itself offers some reassurance through the lyrics, telling us, and I'm quoting, if you feel you're sinking, I'll jump right over into cold, cold water for you. And though time may take us into different places, I will still be patient with you, and I hope you know I won't let go. I'll be your lifeline tonight. I won't let go. He then offered some spoken words that made it clear that for him, where the lifeline might be found. I'm not going to let go of hope, he said. I'm not going to let go of love. I'm not going to let go of God. Put your hand up if you're not going to let go. God is good in the midst of the darkness. God is good in the midst of the evil. God is in the midst, no matter what's happening in the world. God is in the midst and loves you and is here for you. And he went on to ask, what better way is there to beat evil than with love? And then, in a sort of almost like an altar call, he invited people to bless those who were bereaved. He said, I just want to take this moment to honour the people that were lost, that were taken. We love you so much. To the families, we love you so much. And then he invited the crowd, put both hands up to honour those people right now. Everybody say, we honour you, we love you. That was a message that was reinforced subsequently by Coldplay. First of all with Don't Look Back in Anger, which it was inevitable that somebody would have to sing that because it has become a kind of Manchester anthem in the light of this tragedy. But significantly followed by the song Fix You, another one that acknowledges the reality of our struggles while offering consolation and hope. When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, stuck in reverse and the tears come streaming down your face, when you lose something you can't replace, when you love someone but it goes to waste, could it be worse? Light will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you. Now, during the singing of that song, there was a burst of colour as origami symbols or figures rained down on the crowd, and people stretched their arms out to catch them. Was that an intentional blessing and reassurance, I asked myself, that somebody somewhere would indeed fix them? Looking at the faces of the people, that certainly was how it was received. And finally, it wasn't possible to miss the tangible sign of hope and reflection in the simple fact that Chris Martin joined Ariana in the Oasis hit song Don't Look Back in Anger before she wrapped the evening up with that 1930s classic Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So whatever you call it, it seemed to me there was some kind of, there was a thread that's almost liturgical in the way that it took the audience through and those who were watching on television, a kind of order of reflection and hope and inspiration and moving on from this tragedy. I'll come back to that later. First, there were a couple of other things that struck me. One of them was the serious way that pain and anguish in relation to moral choice was clearly addressed. This note of reality was struck in the very, very first song by Marcus Mumford singing Tim Shell. Of course, the word Tim Shell is hardly one that's in everyday conversation, and the word itself is found in the Hebrew text of the book of Genesis. In the story of Cain and Abel, in describing the moral choices that faced Cain following his exile as a consequence of the murder of his brother Abel. The backstory to the actual reference here in the song is from an episode in John Steinbeck's novel East of Eden, where a group of Chinese sages are discussing the meaning of this word in relation to the question that God asks of Cain. In the choice between good and evil that's placed before him, is Cain being given a promise, you shall triumph over sin? Or was it a command, triumph over sin? Or more literally, which is what the word actually means, you may triumph over sin, implying that Cain had a choice to make. No, almost certainly, virtually none of the concert knowers would either know or care about any of that background to the song, though the lyrics themselves are entirely consistent with it by reminding us of the reality of evil while offering a portal into some other space. Death is at your doorstep, it says, and it will steal your innocence, but it will not steal your substance. You have your choices, and these are what make man great, a ladder to the stars. And then there's the repeated assurance that you are not alone in this. As brothers we will stand and we'll hold your hand, though in the end of the day I can't move the mountains for you. Now that one song encapsulated in brief the underlying theme to everything else that was to happen. Death is real, it will impact your life, there's a moral choice that we each have to make, but you'll not be alone in making it as there'll always be others there to support you. And to round it off, Mumford ended with a direct quotation from the Christian scriptures, 1 John chapter 4 verse 18, love casts out fear. That theme of moral choice and responsibility was picked up again by Miley Cyrus with the song Inspired that came just before Bono's contribution, reminding us that we are meant for more, inviting us, pull the handle on the door that opens up to change. I know that sounds so strange to think we are meant for more. Pull the handle on the door that opens up to change, 'cause you've always felt so small, but no, you aren't at all. And I hope you feel inspired. I hope you feel inspired. That theme of choice and change was picked up more briefly by Ariana herself with the song Be Alright Baby. All them tears gonna come and go, baby, you just gotta make up your mind that every little thing is gonna be alright. And in case that all sounds very self-sufficient, Coldplay with Fix You reminded us again of the need for external empowerment. When you try your best, but you don't succeed, when you get what you want, but not what you need, when you feel so tired, but you can't sleep, stuck in reverse, when you lose something you can't replace, when you love someone but it goes to waste, could it be worse? With the assurance light will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you. The third major thing that struck me was the consistent emphasis on other worlds and the need for help from outside. This theme was introduced in a low-key sort of way very early on in the concert by Take That with 3 songs, Shine, Giants and Rule the World. And again with that element of personal moral choice included here. In Shine, the lyrics go, I know that you can change, so clear your head and come around. You only have to open your eyes. You might just get a big surprise, and it may feel good, and you might want to smile. Giants, I feel us breaking out of empty glory. We are giants in our hearts, every one of us. And then Rule the World. You light the sky. Up above me, a star so bright. You blind me. You and me, we can ride on a star. If angels cry, oh, I'll be there for you, you've saved my soul. Of course, it was Robbie Williams' song Angels that received the most enthusiastic endorsement of this otherworldly theme, with people holding up signs with the word angel written on them. But this theme of other worlds that impinge on and give meaning to our lives in this one also came up in Coldplay's choice of Viva la Vida, which served as a reminder that the old certainties of Christendom, which are mentioned in considerable detail in this song, are gone. When I ruled the world, my castles stand upon pillars of salt and sand. Mention of Jerusalem bells, missionaries, Roman cavalry, and at the end of it all, I know St. Peter won't call my name. A sentiment that alongside Liam Gallagher's Wall of Glass struck a challenging note for concert goers to take home with them, with this line, you were sold a one direction. I believe the resurrection's on and you were wrong. So, what am I making of this in terms of our missional thinking on social liturgy? I think one thing that's important to notice is that in dealing with life generally, and with grief and loss more specifically, practice is now taking precedence over theory. In an earlier generation, and still to some extent today, the key question would have been, why do good people suffer bad things? And we would have addressed that in an intellectual kind of way. But today I suggest that what we do is becoming much more important than what we think. And the meaning of it is not something we can separate from the doing. Now, this, of course, is deeply rooted in the New Testament. Jesus himself said, not everyone who says to me, makes claims to be disciples, uphold the values of the kingdom or whatever. And this is a pattern repeated in a different way in philosophical thinking by the likes of Habermas and the rise of practical theology as a method. In missional terms, I suggest that we have often thought of following Jesus in terms of believing, belonging, and behaving. Something that is a bit of a challenge today to how we understand faith is that for many people, I feel, the order is reversed. We are looking for new ways to behave, whether it be in a concert like this, or changing our own personal lifestyles, or indeed changing the world. We are looking for new ways of behaving. We're looking for groups to belong to, others who will support us and stand alongside us in the behaving. And eventually we might start thinking, well, is there more to it than this? This is very much in line with the way that Jesus engaged people in discipleship, giving them experiences, behaving, amongst a group of people who would support them in the experiences, and then casually asking questions along the lines of, do you remember what happened back there? How about? What if? What do you think about? And I think we see evidence of this in the way that practice is taking precedence over thinking in theoretical terms as we approach some of these big challenging issues of our time. I think second thing that strikes me is that though in many ways we believe ourselves to be secular in the sense of an exclusive materialistic focus on the here and now, there was in this concert, as a golden thread through the whole fabric of it, a strong expression of belief in something beyond ourselves. The very first song, Tim Shell, by Marcus Mumford, made reference to a ladder to the stars, soon to be repeated by Robbie Williams with the song Angels, and implying that there's some spiritual realm in which those who had died now live and in which we can be reunited with them. And of course ended with Ariana Grande singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow and many random references in between. 20 years ago, David Hay, zoologist turned theologian, was identifying this kind of feeling that people have that there is something there, and it still persists as belief in something that we might call heaven or the angelic realm. Interestingly, this runs counter to the secular vision of John Lennon in his great song Imagine, but also is a challenge to the redefinition of Christian hope that has become so popular in some circles in the Christian church, where the emphasis has tended to become on God's kingdom as something that is here and now, or in this world in the future, placing questions against the notion of other worlds, some other transcendent reality, and so on. I think a third thing that struck me is that listening to and participating in music with other people does have a healing power and a meaning that goes well beyond the notes and even the lyrics themselves. But the choice of songs here was very revealing, I suggest. There was a strong recognition of the reality of grief, and among all the talk of resistance and hope in the face of evil, there was also an admission that it's okay to be fearful. Bono's simple statement brought these apparently conflicting responses together, and in view of some things he's been saying recently about the Psalms, that's perhaps not surprising. Now, there was for me a striking contrast there with the sort of lyrics found in much contemporary Christian worship songs, which in spite of a lot of critique along these lines are still dominated overall by triumphalistic themes that find it hard to recognize the power of evil, except within the narrow confines of a theology that seems to think it's nothing to do with us and is really quite trivial. Actually, for suffering humanity, it's not trivial at all, and recognizing the reality of evil, that not only that grief is okay, not only that hope and love should be encouraged, but actually being terrified is part of who we are. And then finally and fourthly, the role of Ariana Grande herself I think. Here's a 23-year-old female who abandoned the Catholicism that she was brought up in and embraced Kabbalah, whose role in the whole event was pivotal and quite remarkable. What is that saying to us about female empowerment in a church which at best pays lip service to youth as well as to gender equality, and in many traditions is becoming increasingly patriarchal? So finally, the missional question, I think, was well put in a letter to the Church Times a week after the concert took place. Writing there, Professor Pete Ward asked this question: in light of the fact that for the preceding couple of weeks between Ascension and Pentecost, Christians around the world had been praying that the Jesus prayer, "Thy kingdom come." And Pete asked this question: what if what we were witnessing was an answer to that prayer, "Thy kingdom come"? I think that's a really good question. And for me, it has two dimensions. One is this: who are the prophets in today's society? Who are the people who are pointing out the big questions of life and meaning and purpose, and indeed pointing us towards some of the answers? Increasingly, it seems to be not those who are professionally religious, but the storytellers, the artists, the musicians, in other words, the art world in general. Creative people who are able to see beyond the here and now and imagine what might be in the face of what actually is. But I think there's another second dimension to it for me, and that is, how can we acknowledge the many references to Christian beliefs, biblical references, scriptural references throughout events like this? How can we acknowledge that in terms of the Missio Dei, of God being at work in our culture? How can we acknowledge that without needing to inhabit it, to co-opt it, or otherwise to subvert what is happening in such a way that divine presence becomes an opportunity for self-congratulation on our part? And those are really big questions, which is why a group like the Mission Theology Advisory Group is the right place to wrestle with them. So thanks for watching, and there'll be more of this in the days to come.